a don Jaime de Bourbon-Parma, Orange-Nassau, es que cualquier persona que sepa historia de España y historia de Europa, pues te ha clasificado ya inmediatamente. Entonces es de la familia real holandesa y al mismo tiempo también es de la familia ducal de Parma y bueno, tiene antecedentes muy relacionados con la historia española y europea. Hoy está con nosotros porque él es, además de otras cosas, porque a pesar de su juventud, tiene la escalofriante edad de 20 años menos que yo. Y eso es lo importante, lo insultante. Entonces, la cuestión, o aquí lo importante, es que él, a pesar de su juventud, digamos, tiene un currículum muy amplio. Pues ha estado, por ejemplo, en sitios tan curiosos, tan, digamos, problemáticos como Bagdad o Afganistán. Y en la actualidad es el embajador de Holanda ante la Santa Sede, y también ha estado en muchísimas organizaciones, unas veces porque le han nombrado a él y otras veces porque él, por su propia iniciativa, ha creado muchas actividades, ¿no? Digamos que son actividades muchísimas y casi infinitas, y especialmente lo que me parece que tiene interés especialmente para nosotros, los del Centro de Desarrollo, pues es obviamente todo lo relacionado con los recursos naturales. En él ha tenido muchas iniciativas muy innovadoras, muy, digamos, rompedoras en cierto sentido, y siempre además con esa marchamo o esa característica de procurar que todo sea lo más transparente, la menor corrupción posible, etc. Entonces aquí estamos básicamente para escucharle a él, a don Jaime de Bourbon, y bueno, pues nos va a hablar de las nuevas iniciativas en el desarrollo. Él hará la presentación en inglés, creo que ya está anunciado, por lo tanto todos sabéis muy bien, pero a él le podéis preguntar. Bueno, podéis preguntarle en holandés, si queréis también, le podéis preguntar en alemán, le podéis preguntar en italiano, le podéis preguntar en francés y le podéis preguntar en español. O sea que yo creo que no se nos olvida. Quizás hay algún chino que no lo sabe.
Eso no lo sé. Eso no lo sé.
Adelante, doctor.
Bueno, gracias. I was asked to do it in English as well because you have an international body of students, so I'll be speaking in English. So it's a great pleasure to be with you, and natural resources is one of the areas I'll be discussing, but we can go in any direction you want afterwards. I used to be, before ambassador to the Holy See, to the Vatican, I used to be the special envoy for natural resources for the Dutch government, and it was a new function I helped create, and now it's actually pursued by someone else, also a very young diplomat. So we try to get kind of this young vibe in the ministry and innovation going. Natural resources, I'll be talking about two things. One, about the general issue on natural resources and focusing on metals and minerals. And the second, I'll be talking about conflict minerals specifically, and a specific initiative that I developed in Congo of conflict-free minerals, to show that in the worst places, like in Eastern Congo, in the Kivus, you can still source responsibly. And if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. So first, let me see how the clicker works. There we go. So, resource dependency. We have just 4 different types of resources. You had coffee or tea this morning, so water is something that we all are experiencing. We took a shower or whatever. Food production, we all had a breakfast. The energy is here. We don't even think about all these resources because it's all readily available and it seems nearly for free. And you've got metals and minerals. We all want to build cars, so we want to, in the structures of this building, in your chair, in my glasses, in my phone, everywhere there's metals and minerals. They're so far away from us that we don't even think about them anymore. But they all come from only one place, this Earth, and there's a lot of pressures. We all know that there's population growth around the world, and there is also climate change. And climate change will pressure one specific thing, and that's water management. There'll be areas in the world with climate change that'll be much drier, and there'll be places where there's too much water, there'll be floods. And water management is incredibly important for food production, for energy production, and also for mines. Mines use tons of water. So what we're also going to get is a conflict amongst resources. So resources in general becoming scarce, but we'll also have to think which one will we prioritize and when. So this is what we are. There's a nice picture of, so in the next years, we'll see that resources will become something that's far away, something much more central in our politics and also in diplomacy. It will be something key. So this is a picture of of South Korea, a normal hot day where everybody goes, and it kind of summarizes everything. You've got overpopulation, heat, and scarce resource, which is, in this way, the swimming pool. And this seems like chaos. Luckily, we've got institutions that are made to create order. And we've got one deputy of the EU, but this could be the Security Council, it could be your own government, or it could be your municipality. The only problem is, well, the tensions in the world are rising around resources, and there's more potential chaos. The institutions worldwide, any institution, is losing credibility. Their own populations are saying they're not democratic enough, we don't feel represented enough, it feels too far away. So while we've got crisis, also the crisis management institutions are losing their credibility. And then there's new game changers in resources, and I'll focus more on metals and minerals now. China is growing, and they are, this is an image of 2000. Those are the coal that going to China and some of the coal leaving China. Within 10 years, it grew like this. So I'll go back and forth. You see that. Sorry. So you see that it's growing massively. And in metals and minerals, exactly the same thing. Within 10 years, you see massive production of metals and minerals moving towards China. China, 5 years ago, had 45% of the world's consumption of metals and minerals. Now it's over 50%. So they're the biggest clients for all the products that we buy that are produced there. So to secure their resources, and they used to just to be in the raw material production as any developing country, they quickly moved upscale to the high quality and sort of high tech industry. And to secure this huge economy, very diverse economy, they are securing mines around the world. So they're buying mines in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, very distributed around the world, to make sure that this production will actually come to China. Because they fear if they don't have enough resources coming their way, they won't have the growth levels, and they might get social unrest. So the one-party system buys their legitimacy with growth, and if there's no growth, they have political instability. So the mines are one thing we all know about that. It's called land grab and whatever, mine grab, and many of those terms. Actually not that different than our companies did. But it's a very clear policy pushed by the government with a lot of state aid. Second, which is less known, is that China is buying shares in mining companies like Rio Tinto or Vale or the big mining companies. Well, it sounds fine. They maybe have 6% of a company. But if you add it up, they're one of the bigger or maybe the biggest single shareholder within the company with only 6% of that company's shares. And they do data mining. So they learn as much as they can from these international companies. And these companies are not threatened by it because China is their biggest customer. So they kind of like this dependency. But there's all possibility that the Chinese homegrown mining companies will compete with these international companies in the future as well. And then least known, but most worrisome, is that China is building their influence bigger and bigger, and they bought, of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, bought the London Metal Exchange. So that's the free platform for trade in metals and minerals. If you know China, you know that business and government are not that separated, and China is the biggest market, they now know who's trading with whom and for what. And the London Metal Exchange has secret reserves. Reserves, like a bank needs to have reserves. So in times of shock, or for people actually not trading just value, but actually real metals, that you can actually deliver or dampen the shocks. And they're secret reserves so that the London Metal Exchange can decide when to use the reserves, and people won't speculate on the reserves themselves. But now, if it's Hong Kong Stock Exchange, these reserves moved from countries like the UK, but also the Netherlands, the ports where a lot of these reserves are moving to China. Will they be there as a cushion for speculation of the London Metal Exchange? Or will there be as a physical reserve for the Chinese economy? And if they're used for dual use, it becomes much less of a tool, this whole platform, this whole London Metal Exchange. They're already trading on Hong Kong time. And they might, the idea is that they'll move to Hong Kong, much closer to the biggest market in the world, China. So the influence on China in this market is huge, and they're doing a very strategic long-term view. People were laughing for the price they paid for the London Metal Exchange. If you think in 5-year terms, it was a ridiculous amount they paid. But if you think 20, 30, 50 years, it was a brilliant move, a very good investment. So Europe, we need a lot of metals and minerals. These are you report on the critical metals and minerals. And what you see is that they're everywhere, except for in Europe. So we're highly dependent on import of these metals and minerals. So you see that, just to show you, it's like a donut. It's all around us, but not in our own backyard. So the supply risk, why do you get a shortage of metals and minerals? Sometimes it's geological, because we don't find new sources. There's, you know, and sometimes we find new again, and then this problem gets resolved. Some geologists say, well, theoretically there are many resources and we should always find it. So why are we drilling deeper and deeper with problems for aquifers and many other pollution problems? Why are we going into nature reserves? Think of the North Pole, or think of the Amazon, if there's so many resources. So it all shows, and we go even into war zones to get metals and minerals. So that shows that we're desperate, that there might be theoretically a lot of sources according to geologists, but in practice we haven't found enough or not fast enough. So these are the natural places where we're mining, even deep sea where we're taking resources. The second is economic. We've got a lot of monopolies, and we also have the problem of, and they can determine when metals and minerals become available to you or not. Short-term investments into mining, and mining takes about 30 years to fully develop, or 6 years to become online, and then a mine can last 30 years or more. So you need long-term investment, and the minute that they invest in it, the market can change again, and the commodity prices drop, and your investment stands still. And the third thing is volatility. So I always compare a glass of, say, cappuccino. It's the same with all the resources. In this market, which company are you going to invest? So which coffee company are you going to invest in? You don't know which one is going to survive in this market. So instead of the company, you invest into the coffee beans. So you focus on the commodity. In the past, 70% of your glass was real investment into coffee, and 30% of the price was determined due to speculation. People were not really interested in coffee, but just want to trade in coffee because they feel that's a safer investment. Now it's turned around. It's 30% of the investments actually go into coffee production. 70% is speculation. It's foam on top of your cappuccino. It's not the real coffee. So if that's true, then if you're investing into the real economy, you've got a huge volatility risk in your investment for people that are not even interested in creating more coffee. So that creates also scarcity. And the third is geopolitical. Sometimes you get new laws, say on the environment, which are totally understandable, but change the supply, because there's more you need to do before you're allowed to exploit issues. There could be political use of resources. We saw between China and Japan, there's a dispute over territory in the sea, and a fishing vessel of China bumped into a military vessel of Japan. The Japanese arrested the crew, and then China said, well, you won't get any of the rare earth elements. Those are high-tech minerals used in LCD screens, in LED lights, in permanent magnets for wind parks. So the whole new economy, the market is fully in the hands of the Chinese. So they decided, for political reasons, not to give it anymore to Japan. The world woke up. Well, metals and minerals used for political reasons. So politics can play a role in scarcity. So to manage risk, and I'll quickly finish this part and then I'll go to the conflict minerals, you have to keep on focusing on functioning markets. You can do the Chinese thing, also buy mines and secure it for your own countries, but if we all start to do it, it's highly inefficient. And if we start with scrambled resources, we as Europe will always lose because we don't have so much cash just to lay around by governments to buy in resources. And the resources you might buy today might be the wrong mix for what you need for your technological development in the future. US Army has bought a lot of metals and minerals and put them all in big silos, thinking this is crucial for our defense industry. And there was so much innovation that they didn't need this mix. They needed another mix of metals and minerals. and they were oxidizing away in the warehouses with a lot of costs. So what is much more important is to continue focusing on transparent and open markets, so that we all source from open markets. By the way, China is securing resources, but still the way biggest source of resources they still get through the open market. So diplomatic relations with countries, it's very important that we have, that they want to do business with you. That if they have a choice between 3 countries offering similar prices, that you've got good relations. So we're refocusing on countries important for us for food production and for electricity and for metals and minerals. Restarting our relationship not in a paternalistic old way, but really as partners. And my example in conflict minerals goes to that. And the awareness of companies and many companies are so short-term focused. When I talk to, say, Philips in the Netherlands, which makes electronics, if I talk to the ones who buy the products and resources, they don't buy the resources themselves. There's 7 layers between them and one of these machines, 7 different companies. So they think, well, there's no scarcity of resources. If one supplier doesn't give it to me, I'll go to another one. But if they don't realize that all the suppliers get it from one source, and that's scarce, then they have a problem. So slowly the CEOs of those companies and the strategists, not just the short-term focused suppliers, they're realizing that this is something they have to focus on. And also in development aid, we're starting to develop this new idea. Supply chain management is something we all have to work on to make it fair. And that's the next example I'm going to give. And most important, actually, is efficiency. Reduce, reuse, recycle, and redesign products that you can harvest. So all the waste, electronic waste we have, 1 container of electronic waste has more gold in it than gold ore from a gold mine, which has a lot of dirt and rocks and everything in it. So we call that urban mining. And that's something we still see waste as waste, and we throw it away, and it goes to a place like Ghana, where little kids pull it apart. And it's very difficult to pull it apart, so a lot of fumes coming out is has a huge health risk. We need to design it such that we can take it apart and immediately put it into another use. And one great example I would urge you to Google is Fairphone. Fairphone is a Dutch initiative by a social entrepreneur, and he was an activist to show that electronic companies could be more fair, should be more fair, and then he decided instead of activism, let me try to make a fairer phone, one that is more social and more equitable. And he put together this phone, and now the next version is modular, so you can actually, like Lego, take it apart, and you can change every bit. You can order a new camera, a new screen, and you can put it together very easily, click it together yourself. And with the iPhone of Apple, you have to send it back. One little button breaks down, which actually broke down on my volume broke down on my phone. And I have to send it back, cost me 150 euros. And if the phone is broken, I throw it away. And so if you redesign it in such a way, you can be much more efficient with your resources. So now the second part. And we're talking about good relations with sourcing countries. And therefore you need to establish a new sort of philosophy in working with them. Now the worst collaboration you can imagine is if companies work in war zones. They take out resources from a warring zone and sell it cheaply here and actually finance war. It never works that directly. It's usually local companies working with the warlords. They sell the product onwards to a trader who kind of knows where they come from. Then sell it on the international market because it's mixed with minerals from all over the world. And we buy it not knowingly, and we're actually indirectly financing wars. So this is tin that I took out of a mine in Eastern Congo. I went to Eastern Congo, and I went to talk to the cooperatives, and they took me into their mines. And you get to a small mine pit about this high. It's full of mud, very dark, very slippery. And you go down and you have to hold on all the wooden beams, and there's cockroaches and all kinds of things. And the deeper you go, the more stronger also the odor of toilets, because if you go 500 meter down in the earth, nobody's going out to go to the toilet, so everything is done in there. So you've got problems of cholera and many other diseases down there as well. Very little light, very little mine security, and these guys are working tremendous difficult circumstances, but it's a job. This is how it looks like tin, and tin is used for soldering. So if you have two little electrical wires together with a little silver-colored point in it, that's soldering. Another use of tin is if you have got, say, a Coca-Cola can, and it's either made of aluminium or of steel. And if it's steel, they coat it with tin so it doesn't oxidize, so you don't get a bad taste in your Coke. So it's used widely everywhere, and it's not a very expensive metal, but it's also present in Eastern Congo, and it's one of the conflict minerals. And it ends up in products like this. You see in these plates, soldering, in cans, but in every electronic device we have, we've got tin right here. And it comes from countries, in many countries of the world, but one of them is Congo, and this is Eastern Congo. And in Congo, the conflict that we all know about in Rwanda, the genocide, that never stopped. The warring groups split and went on into Eastern Congo. It got mixed with local tensions between different groups there, and it made it even worse. So there's an over 2 to 3 million people associated deaths to this ongoing conflict. And what happens is that a warring group takes a mine and exploits the mine, sells the minerals, as I just explained, and finance the war. Wars are incredibly expensive. You have to pay for all these bullets, for these weapons, for the cars, for the soldiers. And then they take a lot of income also from the local population by terrorizing and exploiting local population. But a big part of their income was mining. And we've got criminals like Bosco, the man in the middle, and he's now arrested and is now a guest in the Netherlands, in The Hague, in the International Court of Justice, of Criminal Court. And but this is the world that is being financed through mining. And then the US did a great thing. They passed a law called Dodd-Frank Act, and in that law there is a provision that says no company in the US or affiliated to the US, which is nearly every international company in Europe, is allowed to take any mineral from Congo or all the neighboring countries, which is the whole central part of Africa, unless you can prove that it comes from a conflict-free mine. That sounds great. 90% of the aid of the trade stopped because Congo looks like this. To the left is an open mine pit where people work in groups of cooperatives to exploit the minerals. You see, they wash it. There is no traceability. There is a very bad governance. It's a failed state. Many of these countries, specifically Eastern Congo. There's very little state influence in Eastern Congo, so you can't really track it. So the easiest thing the companies can do is decide to leave Congo altogether. Just say, well, there's other sources. We can go to Australia. We can go to Peru. Many other places in the world. Why should we get it from Congo? So the positive effect was the warlords had less of income because 90% of their trade stopped, 90%. Only 10% which goes a bit to China, a bit to India. And so that's a great thing, and then the warlords find other sources to pay for their war, but the easiest source has been taken away. The negative thing is all the mines that have nothing to do with the conflict, which are hundreds of mines, thousands of people, are now left without a job. So the conflict-free mines are people without a job. And thousands of men on the street without a job is a new trigger for conflict. So the solution was a good idea, but the effect could be even more war. So doing a conference in Paris, which I was allowed to chair, of the OECD, we talked about the American law and we developed guidelines. So what are the steps companies need to make to comply to the American law safely without being sued and actually source responsibly from these countries? And on the other side, you see, those are all the lawyers of the big companies, electronics, transport, planes, jewelry companies, everybody using metals and minerals. To the long side here were countries from the regions, from the Great Lakes region, so Rwanda, Burundi, Congo, Angola, you name it. And you can't see it on this side here, were all the NGOs and activist organizations. Well, the NGOs and the business, they hate each other. And meanwhile, the Congolese were saying, okay, who's actually going to do business? Because they said, we have the American law, which in a way has international sort of presence, influence. We have now the guidelines where we know what are the steps to be taken by companies to source responsibly. So now you should be able to do business in Eastern Congo. And I thought, well, Congo is at war. It's very corrupt. I wouldn't invest a dime in Eastern Congo. But then there was a coffee break. And usually in coffee breaks, the most extraordinary things happen. Not in these meetings, but outside of these meetings. And Philips came to me, and Tata Steel, an Indian steel company, but also based in the Netherlands. They came to me and they said, we're interested in a pilot project. And I thought, who should lead this? I said, oh, I'm the chair, so maybe I should propose it. So I rented a room right after this small room, and said to the plenary, whoever's interested in a real pilot to see if we can set up a conflict-free supply chain, please join us. And there were people from all layers. We had people from government, from NGOs, from think tanks, universities. We had people from business, from every level, from traders, smelters, component manufacturers, and end users like Philips. Everybody was sitting there. And I took a flip chart, and I drew out the supply chain, so all the levels where the mineral goes to. And everybody gave comments on how it should look like. And then every 2 weeks, we had a conference call with a core group of these people. And 3 months later, my Minister of Development Aid gave some money to set up a tracing system. So every bag of tin from a mine we found in Eastern Congo that we validated, checked that was conflict-free, so it wasn't selling minerals to warlords. We tagged, and every bag had its unique tag, and that was followed all the way to the border. We found that mine. We found an exporter, so a Congolese exporter, that we also checked the background, never worked with rebel groups. We found an international trader, which is called Traxys, a smelter in Malaysia, so there's no smelters in Africa. They actually go, tin smelters, you have to go to Malaysia. And solder manufacturers, so to make the soldering for electrical equipment. So there were two, Alpha and AIM, one of the two biggest in the world, and then end users. And it wasn't just Philips and Tata Steel, but also Nokia, Hewlett-Packard, IBM, Motorola, BlackBerry, Intel, and Apple joined, and the phone I talked to you, Fairphone. So these all joined to buy from one mine. Where we are today, I thought, let's see how far we get with this. So 3 months after financing this traceability in Eastern Congo, so complying to all the rules of the American law, we exported the first tin, and half a year later it was in the products of most of these companies. And they joined because, say, Philips said, we don't join because we need this tin from Congo. We can go anywhere in the world. Before, we might have sourced indiscriminately, so not knowing where it came from. And some of the tin might have come from Congo, and we might have financed a war without knowing it, because there's so many layers of companies. Now we do know, and there's much of transparency in the system. And if we leave these thousands of men without a job, we know we're, by staying away, actually contributing to conflict. So let's try and see if we can resolve this. There is now not only one mine functioning in Eastern Congo. It was successful. In the mine I visited many times, there's about 2,000 people working there. So 2,000 people working, by the way, in horrible conditions. There's mine safety conditions, there's prostitution, there is sometimes health issues with toxic issues and diseases in the mines. There is, you name it. I mean, all the mining problems are all there. But it's conflict-free, and these men can work again. These men are spending money in the village. The women are selling fish and the mining equipment back to the miners, and a small economy is developing. And these mining cooperatives are reinvesting into security. And slowly, very slowly, they're investing in a better standard. But we're working first with conflict-free and a job, and then slowly. We could have put a lot of development aid into this one mine and made it a Disneyland in Eastern Congo with big schools and nice bridges. But the idea is also to see if you can generate their own standards and keep up to their own development. This system, I thought it would fail actually, but it's actually worked. And we see that we'll go where it's spread later. These are the products where it all got finished. And by the way, the middle one is Tata Steel. They make steel plating for cans. One of the buyers of these cans is Campina, which is a Dutch agricultural, one of the biggest agricultural companies in the world. And they say a lot of milk products, powder, etc. in cans. They make 1 billion cans per year with this conflict-free material is incorporated in that. This guy's happy, he's back in the job. He probably has tin in his light lamp and in his phone, and that could have come originally, about 4% of the world's production in tin can come from Congo. So there's a chance that it is there, but he's happy that he has a job again. And the conclusion is, well, I'll leave this, sorry, I'll skip this because this is... So how many mines do we have today? And so it's not one mine, it's now 140 mines. And you have to think every mine pit is about 1,000 workers. So now they developed totally separate from our initiative. We just showed it was possible. There were many initiatives we brought together. Suddenly you see it really take off. 240 mines. And so new diplomacy, how we see it, is the government has a role to play. Business has a role to play. Social entrepreneurs. Aid organizations, knowledge institutions like yours, and internet groups. And so the government in this case was the Netherlands. In this case, businesses were the cooperatives, the 2 cooperatives in the mine, but also the electronic and steel industry and jewelry industry. Social entrepreneurs is like Fairphone, this phone that also incorporated this conflict-free material because they want to show that you can have fairer phones. So this was one of the elements, one of the stories they tell with selling their story. Aid organizations implementing the whole program. Knowledge institutions, they check where we're going and what else is out there that we can learn to incorporate into our system. And internet groups like Resolve to spread the message. And who leads here? It's the one that has initial phase most to offer. In some problems in the world, so this is an example of how you can work. We don't work just diplomats amongst ourselves anymore or business amongst themselves. The real solutions for development aid is if all these work together. And here, in this case, we were in the lead in the Netherlands because, I was in the lead because I was a neutral broker. I had no commercial interest. I didn't care who made what money. I just wanted this to work. And therefore, I could mediate between all these groups in the supply chain that are dependent on each other. Not on what price should be paid where, but why is it not working, how can we improve this and push it through. So this neutral broker role was very important. I played it, but it could have been someone else as well. So there we are. That's an example. We've done the similar thing on supply chain management to make sure that those where it comes from don't get penalized. So in this case, the Congolese in Eastern Congo. By the way, now there's a mine in Rwanda. There's mines in Burundi coming online, being traceable. Although those are by the definition conflict-free because there's no conflict going on. Although Burundi now it's getting worse and worse. Transparency also helped against corruption, and it helps taxing it correctly and transparently and creating more revenue for the country itself. So we've done that also with food industry. For soya, there are supply chains. There is for fishing industry more fair supply chains. We've done that for there's many. I mean, there's about 15 different supply chains we have developed in the same philosophy of business together with government, together with NGOs and knowledge institutions to try to improve the supply chain and make sure, say, that the farmers in Ghana actually generate a better income, that these farmers develop a better agricultural practice, that the earth doesn't get depleted within their generation, and therefore they won't be able to produce in the longer term. So to resist the short-term focus and to develop in the long term, but basically to improve their livelihood. And you also get good relations with these farmers, and they're more likely to want to sell to you with a fair proposition than to others. So it's a win-win situation all around. And so supply chain management is something that you should keep in mind. But also looking cross-disciplinary in the university, but also outside of the university, cross-disciplinary to other parts of the world, and try to understand why do business their way they do. how can we find the win-win space? Why do NGOs are so activist? They have a point, but where would they be happy with this or that? And I must say the ones who I had most pushback from were not the NGOs really implementing things, but were some activist NGOs that said the better is the enemy of the good. So they said, what you're doing is good, but it could be even better. And so they attacked me. They're saying, well, there's still child labor in the mine. I said, yes, I'm telling you straightforward, there's still child labor in the mine. But it's conflict-free, and let's start from there and build it. So those who are about the process are often attacked by those who want a perfect world. And although I want a perfect world as well, I try to do it step by step. But in dialogue, also that went well, and understood that this way we could reach more than just preaching and shouting on the sideline. And that's where we are.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Please.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the very good talk. It's very interesting.
Where are you from?
I'm from Kenya. I'm my dad, yeah.
And you are?
My dad.
Oh, fantastic. So it's 2 generations.
2 generations, yes. So I found your talk very interesting. I only have 2 concerns.
Please.
I'm just worried about what you say in this new initiative for tracking the ore from the mines, and you place tags on them. I'm wondering just how secure that is, because I'm thinking about anything could go wrong. If I could start just from the mine itself, I could even steal the tags or place the tags in other bags which are coming from conflict area mines, or actually the warlords themselves could put pressure on the mines which are operating legitimately and say, okay, fine, unless you take some of our ore, you guys will have problems. And you will know about it because you're not there all the time. There's no one policing this. From that chain all the way to the smelters, I'm thinking there are a lot of things which could go wrong. How sure are you that all this supply chain actually is secure? That's my first concern.
So I'll first answer that, and then I'll go to your second concern. The way it works, and there is a margin for error for sure. What we do is immediately at the mine pit when it comes out, it's put in bags. Then how it traditionally goes, it goes to the center of the village. There it's actually taken out of the bags, chopped, cleaned, and made more pure, the ore, so less stone and sand and more ore. And it's re-tagged again and sent to the border. So there's 2 places where you can intervene. By the way, every tag has a unique number, which is uplinked immediately to a database outside of the country in Congo. So you'll know if there's bags introduced where a number doesn't correspond or is already used, or you actually know where it's traveling at that moment. So to add tags or print extra tags with similar numbers is just not possible. The system wouldn't accept it. What we also do is we look at the quantity and the weight and the quality of the ore. And if anything of them change, it's a reason for investigation. And there's an investigation team of government, of local NGO, of international NGO, going in to check and see what's different. And there's a German geological service that can actually even look at the geological footprint. It's like a finger footprint. Every mine has its own, mine ore has its own characteristics, mix of minerals that are mixed into the sand. So you can see, hey, this is so different. This comes from a different area. Then the whole mine closes down, and we move to another mine or everything else. So it's so until now we've had several incidents testing it. For instance, one. So no armed groups can earn money with it. So not rebel groups, but also not government troops. So a colonel from the government came in, and he started selling separately from the same mine minerals, and then we shut operations down. He got reprimanded. He was sent to another part of the country, so he couldn't create problems anymore, and it started again. But how did we hear? Not through the locals, but through an international NGO called International Alert, who are incredibly critical on us and constantly looking and seeing what is wrong. But that helps us as well to resolve these issues and talk to the local government. So it's good enough. There can always be a couple of bags misplaced or misused or traded. The question then is, with the worth of 20 euros per bag, or I don't know how much it is, can you actually finance a war? And that's actually quite low. So the margin of error can't finance a war. So in that sense, I think it's a good enough system in a very difficult environment to operate because of corruption and civil strife like Kivus in Eastern Congo. So I think it's thought out quite well. And it's adaptive, so we can always learn and say, hey, listen, let's do it differently. We can always close down a mine. So this original mine was closed not because of political reason, but because the ore contained also arsenicum, which is dangerous for your health. And so that was closed down, and they moved to other mines. So there's many reasons to adapt and change locations. So that's always possible.
Yeah. And how long has this system been working?
So this was, I think I started in 2003, so 3 years now. So in 3 years it went from 1 to 140 mines. And I didn't follow how the traceability works now. Everybody tells me that it was based on what we've done in the first mine. But I'm sure it adapted and become more nimble as well. And it's now fully self-financed, so it's no development aid coming into it, but it's paid by the cost of operations. Yeah. Yeah. Please, second concern.
Yeah, my second question was about looking at the supply chain the other way around. Because there's a lot of complaining about the warlords in Africa and who's financing them and all that. But they don't make the arms. The arms somehow have to get to them. I always wonder how they get to them. How come that despite everything, the arms always get to Boko Haram, or they get to Southern Sudan, or they get to the Somalis? It's not like they have got tunnels or there are controls in places where you can find. Who actually manufactures these arms? How do they get there? How come no one is doing anything about it?
So first, the amount of arms in Africa, because the one war on the next is huge. So it goes from maybe once an area supported by arms from say maybe you would have given arms to Egypt. Egypt buys new arms again, resells them. Or there was a conflict and one group was helped versus the other one and gets arms. The arms most arms in Africa are very low grade. So it's Kalashnikovs, which is AK-47, which is a rapid fire gun, or it's rocket propelled grenades, or these kind of guns. So they're very cheap. You can buy on the market in Congo, at least a couple of years back, for 75 euros a Kalashnikov rifle. And they have had many lives. They are of Chinese origin or of Ukrainian origin or many origins. But they've been going from one conflict to the next and sold onwards. So there's a huge informal market in weapons, of existing weapons going through Africa and other parts of the world. So that's the biggest. So it's easiest to think there's one country selling all these weapons new to every rebel group in Africa. Well, that's not the case. If you look at these weapons, they are all 20, 30, 40 years old. And they're very robust weapons, so you can keep on using them. So that's one. There's also an influence of new influx. So there you have to look at very criminal countries, I would say, and even criminal traders that are actually supplying new weapons also to rebel groups and making money on the back of them. And they are very much linked now with human smuggling. So we see the same people smuggling people into Europe, and also in human exploitation, in drugs. So all these routes are all very similar, and the financing of them is very difficult to follow. So what you want to do is follow the money, and try to track these sales down. But money is very, very fluid. In Somalia, for instance, what they do with the money they got from piracy, they don't even send it onwards. Someone else with Somali origin, say in France, will guarantee for that loan and knows that the money for him is reserved in Somalia, and they'll pick it up another time or use it for other reasons. So you can't even follow the line. There's an agreement between two people over a telephone line. So it's very difficult to tackle that. So the only thing that we can actually do is tackle one of the. So the weapons is very difficult to tackle. The financing to buy the weapons is difficult, but they should have financing at first. They have to have money to be able to buy weapons, and that's what you try to tackle with these minerals. So this is the easiest bit of that triangle to tackle. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, thank you very much for coming. It's been very interesting. One question, how do you choose the mines that are going to be part of the program? Do they talk to you or do you
So there's been a nationwide geological survey of where there are mines on the 4 conflict minerals, which is gold, the most difficult because it's most worth, tin, which you just saw, coltan, also used in phones, it's a great conductor, and wolfram, tungsten. And wolfram is, for instance, in lights, the light bulb, the little wire that gets really hot but doesn't burn through, that's wolfram. You use it in airplane motors because it can withstand a lot of heat, so you mix it with normal steel, and it's used in many things. So those are the conflict minerals. So you look in these geological surveys, and then you start, they started nationally to check all the mines one by one with international supervision to classify them conflict-free. And very quickly they all came online. Once they were classified, they decided to join, invest into traceability, and that's how it worked.
And then I have 2 other questions if you have time, so they're very quick. Have you, because I see that you work with knowledge institutions such as this one, for example, have you seen welfare improvements? Have you measured them in the sense of...
welfare improvements?
From the areas where the mines are located?
Personally, because I moved on to another job and there's now a successor of mine, I didn't see the studies made. They did make some baseline studies then when we were there, to see how does the site look now. There were indications of welfare improvement because the money was coming in, and the miners were buying equipment from local population, and they were gaining some income as well. So the indications, but I haven't seen the final verdict. What you could do is Google IPIS, I-P-I-S. They've done quite a few studies also on the impact of this scheme, and they should give you the right numbers to see what actually improved on the ground economically. Yeah.
I mean, probably it has crossed your mind. For example, when these mines start operating in a conflict-free environment, the profits, how are they being managed? In the sense that from this, let's say I own the mine, I get my profit, and then for some reason a conflict group just has leverage on me. I can finance the war. So do you look at that?
So everything gets checked. So the mine ownership. So for instance, this first mine was owned by a Canadian concession, which never mined there because it was too dangerous to invest in there. But we checked the Canadians to see if they were involved somehow in this scheme. Then you look at the 2 cooperatives. You check them. So everybody got checked on the way who you do business with to make sure that they don't finance. And the model how. It's always the small ones that get squeezed. So because there's an additional cost of tagging, of course, what the producers all said, well, let the miners pay for it. And what we try to do is to alleviate that, to make sure that they are not the ones additional just earning a couple of euros per day to earn nothing. I mean, because they have to pay for the traceability. I mean, that would be criminal. So that's how we try to cushion it. And now it's mostly the exporter, which always makes a big margin. That is now paying most traceability. But it's always a danger that the weakest one in the supply chain gets to carry the cost. And so it's always a risk. Please.
Aprovechando que se ha invitado también a utilizar otros idiomas.
Sí, ¿por qué? Sí, por favor.
El bello español. Bueno, yo le felicito, he aprendido un montón. Yo me dedico a la demografía. Y quería hacerle un par de preguntas relacionadas con este tema. ¿Qué papel está teniendo usted? Me ha gustado mucho la metáfora del vaso de café.
Sí.
¿Qué papel están teniendo las grandes multinacionales y gobiernos europeos interesados especialmente en determinados recursos energéticos? El 80% de coltán de las reservas del mundo están en Congo. Francia está teniendo un protagonismo.
8%.
El 80%.
¿80 hay? Sí.
Sí, de coltán el 80%
Ah, no,
está en
yo pensaba que era mucho menos.
No, hay. Y el peso que está teniendo en la construcción de teléfonos móviles es muy importante, el coltán. Entonces, ese interés que tienen también algunos países europeos por sacar rédito de situaciones de conflicto, ¿qué papel está teniendo el papel de las multinacionales en la volatilidad del precio de los minerales,
Sí.
ese 80%, ese cambio tan espectacular que
Sí.
se ha comentado con la taza del café, se puede también ir aplicando a muchísimos recursos.
Por todas partes,
Por
sí.
todas partes. Entonces, ¿hasta qué punto es un descenso en la oferta o en la disponibilidad de recursos y no un incremento de la volatilidad debido a una especulación mirando el futuro y especulación por parte de determinados agentes?
Sí.
Entonces eso yo creo que es...
No, esto es clave. Yo creo que es exactamente esto que... Oh, shall I say it in English?
Yeah, sure.
No, multinationals, if they are into resources, they invest into their own business, which is good. So it's mostly the financiers that speculate. And speculation can be fantastic, but it can also have very harmful effects. In this case, because the rest of the economy is doing so bad, they go to the most basic things, which is the resources. And actually, instead of helping it, they are not helping it because they're not actually investing. They're just increasing the worth of the resource without changing anything. Yeah. So the question is, what role does the multinational plays? It plays an important role, but it can be a positive one if they're really interested in the real economy. Yeah.
Y la segunda cuestión es, yo creo que, claro, cuando hablábamos del futuro de los recursos, me estaba acordando yo de esa famosa apuesta entre Julian Simon y Paul Ehrlich sobre el precio de los recursos, cuando en los años 80 surge el problema del crecimiento de la población y Julian Simon le apuesta a Paul Ehrlich: elija los 8 minerales que quiera y yo le aseguro que aunque vaya a haber un incremento muy importante de crecimiento de la población en el mundo, todos esos recursos con un incremento de la demanda va a haber un descenso de los precios. Y fue la apuesta que Paul Ehrlich asumió junto a los grandes científicos de Stanford y articuló una serie de minerales y todos ellos, al cabo de 10 años, con la época de mayor crecimiento demográfico del mundo, de la historia de la humanidad, todos esos minerales descendieron sus precios.
¿Y indicaron por qué?
Sí, por procesos de sustitución, por tecnología aplicada a la adquisición, a la explotación de determinados recursos que aumentaron la capacidad de llegar a esos recursos, hubo muchísimo, y por cambios tecnológicos que desarrollaron determinados elementos que sustituyeron a los anteriores. Entonces, yo creo que, yo estoy totalmente convencida que tenemos que hacer un cambio en nuestro modelo de sociedad, que no podemos ser tan... estamos acabando con el planeta, pero hay muy pocas voces que apunten a un descenso en las pautas de consumo. Por ejemplo, yo creo que tiene que haber muchísimas... No, a mí yo le felicito porque me parece, pero quiero aportar alguna idea más que también, por ejemplo, todas las leyes dirigidas a la obsolescencia programada. No puede ser que por un lado estemos tan preocupados por los recursos y por otro lado el poder que tienen las grandes multinacionales hagan que estemos generando basuras, que a mí me ha encantado esa frase que ha utilizado, tenemos que reciclar, tenemos que reutilizar, tenemos que reinventarnos y tenemos que disminuir nuestras causas de consumo. Mientras no hagamos eso y tengamos miedo a que los nuevos países en desarrollo se suban a los niveles de consumo que nosotros tenemos, sería el mundo insostenible, pero tendríamos que
hay que adaptar el sistema y una manera de hacerlo es con impuestos. Hay toda la idea que porque estamos poniendo impuestos sobre personas, nosotros somos carísimos y entonces la mejor manera de ser eficiente, the biggest way to be efficient is to cut people. So we're dispensable resources for production, so we want to make everything automatic, because that saves. So instead of making people expensive, why not make the resource expensive and tax the resource? And if the resource is more expensive and we are cheap, we're going to recycle because we have cheap hands to recycle or to repair or to. And so this would be a system change, which will be very difficult politically to get through. But it's an interesting thing to think, well, why do we tax people and we don't tax resources? I just talked to a farmer just now with a group of friends, and he said, my 3 sons are farming here in Navarra, and they feed about 10,000 people with three farmers. 10,000 people, and they get paid nearly nothing. How is that possible? Or the food stuff coming from Kenya or other parts of the world. How can it be that the most important things are worthless, and all the things that are luxury, which are actually nice to have and not need to have, are worth a lot? Like a cologne. You pay I don't know how much for a cologne. What a waste! It's just and you pay a lot for that, but real food. It's the people producing it are not valued as much in society, because we say, oh, that's simple work. So the structure is flawed and needs to be worked out, and you look at it very pragmatically. So yeah, you're right. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things I find seems to be sort of integral to the conflict mineral narrative is that if you can basically certify that minerals don't come from a conflict area, that conflict will end.
Yeah, it's not true. It's not true.
It's not
yeah.
true, but it's something that sort of seems to be understood in popular culture as
yeah.
well as in some policy circles. I think this is kind of part of where Dodd-Frank came out. There was some belief on the part of representatives in my country that this was how it would work. And in fact, in Congo, we know that the causes of conflict go a lot deeper than that. So I guess one of my questions is if we are going to take this step to get a bunch of different actors together to work on the issue of conflict in this country, should we go beyond just making sure the supply chain is clean and maybe look at political economic problems as well?
Yeah.
Obviously a big leap and maybe not be feasible, but I guess how do these two things fit together? Do multinationals have a role in sort of looking at the underlying causes of conflict in that area, or is it enough to just get the blood off their hands, so to speak?
So minerals are not the cause of conflict. They're the fuel of conflict. So the cause of conflict have to deal with government structure, reputation, power, sharing welfare, or like income and giving people possibilities. And if they don't feel part of the system, they'll resist it. And if they really have to, some do it violently. And others see violence then as a means of life, because nobody's there to control them. So they think with a gun, I can survive and make sure that everybody gives me food, and therefore my group will be safe. So but minerals can be a fuel of conflict, making it worse. Dodd-Frank was on one side good, took the fuel away, but they'll look for other sources. But they're much more difficult to finance war. So they have to look for more difficult. So you are contributing to a situation where there's less income coming to war, doesn't stop totally, less income coming to war, and therefore they feel their pain a bit more. But obviously you need a political solution to the problem. And I don't think multinationals are necessarily the best equipped for political solutions. They can contribute by sourcing responsibly, being aware of the sensitivity, not making it worse. But it remains a political issue, and not always multinationals have the capacity and the right mindset to deal with it. And so there's a limit. So, but a lot of multinationals are engaging formal NGO activists to be their awareness officer, sustainability officer, and check, are we doing it wrong? Because they are, yes, are not interested in the conflict itself, but they're really scared for a bad reputation. Because those companies at the end of the supply chain were very close to customers, like Philips, doesn't want to be branded as financing a war. So they, for brand risk management, they will be engaged in responsible sourcing. But then you always find some people in Philips who are real activists still, and actually really try to do the right thing. And the thing is to help those few in the company have the courage and the capability to tell their board what the real situation is, and convince them that it does make sense also for the whole business to do good. So it's trying to find these little notes. But you want to add to that?
No, this is, you've addressed it very well. I guess the only reflection is, the sort of emphasis that the conflict part of the minerals receives does kind of take away, at least in the public sphere, attention from
the political solution. Itself. Yeah, and it seems tangible. You can really do something about conflict minerals.
It's where we're involved with causing it to some extent. Yeah.
And it's very difficult to deal with an incomprehensive local process where so many different groups and grievances are mixed together. So we feel hopeless about the core issues, and therefore you focus all on the fringe issues, which do help, or potentially can help. But that's not the crux of the issue. You're right. Yeah. Any other?
The last question, because we are running out of time. But
question. Sorry, I have one.
Please, please. Where are you from?
Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Now, you talked a lot about minerals, but I guess oil also is one of the issues in
Sure.
today, especially with respect to the falling oil price.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'd like to know what you think about what could be done with respect to oil, for instance. Could we do the same thing like with supply chain, trying to find out whether the companies, the oil companies, are actually funding conflict?
Yeah.
For several issues, because they have to be there where the oil is.
Yeah. So oil is rarely a conflict mineral. Why? Because you need a lot of infrastructure to be able to export it. So you need pipelines, you need refineries and all these issues. Diamonds you can put in the sole of your shoe and smuggle it out of the country. You wouldn't even detect it in an airplane thing because it's not made of metal. So you can sell high worth diamonds for very easily transport it and sell it and buy arms from it, from the income. Oil, how can a rebel group sell oil? If it doesn't, so it's more difficult. What you do have in, for instance, Nigeria, a lot of criminal groups stealing oil from pipelines and creating their own refineries. So it does create a lot of corruption and a huge environmental problem around it. But usually it's a lack of governance, you would say, to be able to manage the oil industry, and it's less directly linked to as a conflict mineral. Traceability. I read a big study on oil in Nigeria, and Shell is a Dutch-British company that is very active there and doesn't have just a clean history in Nigeria. But it's so complex, and I thought, well, if you can put a chemical in the source where the oil comes out, and you add a second chemical in the official ships leaving Nigeria, and only in those refineries where these two chemicals come together, you know it's clean. And if it only has one of the two, it means it came from the source, but it was stolen afterwards. You could do some sort of traceability, and then you have to convince all the refineries in the world to do this check. But there's so many refineries. Most of the oil stolen in Nigeria goes to local refineries and sold to Western Africa through illegal routes. That this global scheme wouldn't make enough of an impact. So it's such a complex issue in Nigeria to do traceability but someone should try one day and see how far you can get. We never thought this would be possible, by the way, and it might break down tomorrow, but for now it actually worked, and more than we thought. So maybe something on oil in Nigeria could work as well. Yeah, we were to try and see where we get.
I'm sure that many people here want to go to Congo this coming summer, to work on the mines. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome.